I kind of have to go back to when I was in college and the why behind why I chose to go into law school in the first place. And it took me a number of years to process what drew me into that profession. And like I said, my father was a real estate broker. And as we were going out and doing stuff, I mean, he had a cabin up in the boonies and we were out doing work on it. And I would just listen to him on these phone calls, solving these complex problems for clients or for other agents. But they were very legally intense conversations.
Welcome back to the Reno, Tahoe Real Estate Insider. Today I'm sitting down with Ken Lund, who is a highly respected real estate agent in Reno, Tahoe, Northern Nevada. Ken used to be a litigator. He has a law background, and so he is not your typical real estate agent, which I really appreciate. Ken, for those people that don't know you, do you mind giving a quick intro of who you are and what your background is?
It's great to be here, Shay. I'm glad to have somebody keep me company. My whole family left me this morning. My son, I dropped him off at the airport at 5 a.m. to go on a school trip to Japan for a couple of weeks. So, and then my wife and my other son left for California for spring break. My daughter's flying to New Jersey tomorrow. I mean, she lives out of state anyways. So it's just me and my dog that are left.
That's great.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Well, thanks.
I've been in real estate now for 11 years. When I hit that mark where I had been in the real estate profession longer than I had been in the legal profession, that was a big milestone for me, but I'm well beyond that point now. But yeah, I'm from Reno originally. I grew up in Reno, and my father was a real estate broker in Reno from about 1978, and he retired and kind of soft retired in 2018 and fully retired in about 2019. So I grew up in real estate. Well, people ask me all the time, are you the Lund and Ferrari-Lund real estate? And I have to say, no, that's my father is the Lund and Ferrari-Lund real estate.
Okay, so he started it originally.
He did, yes. He started with 6 agents in 1988, he and Carly Ferrari.
Okay.
And then eventually Vince Rossi, who's the current president of Ferrari-Lund, became a partner in the mid 90s. And then, eventually Carly moved on and Vince and my father were partners with others for, a couple of decades.
Yeah.
And then, he sold his interest in the company to Vince.
Okay.
In 2013. So I grew up in it, but never when I was in high school did I think I'm going to follow in the footsteps of my father and go into real estate.
Right, because you went into law, correct, at BYU?
Yeah. Well, I went to undergrad at BYU, and then I went to law school at the University of Utah.
Okay. And they're rivals, aren't they?
Yes, they are rivals.
So
And
you crossed the chasm.
Well, I'm as big of a BYU guy as you can find. There was never any debate on who I was going to root for. But when I was at BYU, I was like, yeah, Utah, great law school. Love the idea of living in Salt Lake City. Mm-hmm. So it made a lot of sense. It wasn't until I went to Utah. There's real feelings about that rivalry up at Utah. And so that actually made me a little more passionate on my
on your BYU
feelings
side.
About BYU. But my wife, I met my wife at the University of Utah, and she was a Utah fan when we got married. So we were a mixed marriage for a while. We've been married for 22 years, and
okay.
she's come around and she's a big BYU fan now, but it took me about a decade to get her there.
Wow. So the marriage stayed good, even though the house was divided. I went to school in West Virginia. I played baseball out there. And so now that they're all in the Big 12 together, it's cool to see BYU and Utah doing their thing. And so,
well, I've got to take a detour there. So I have a trip coming up in May that I'm so excited about. And that's to visit West Virginia.
Oh my, it's beautiful.
I'm a national parks guy.
Okay.
I visited 54 of the 63. Mm-hmm. But a couple of years ago, they threw a wrench in my project and they created a new national park at New River Gorge. Have you been there?
Yes. It's one of the highest bridges in the country. And there's one day out of the year where they allow people to base jump from it. And it's phenomenal. People will go out there and they'll base jump and they'll, pull the chute, and it's West Virginia though, highly underrated as far as a state. It reminds me, I mean, it's got everything. It's got skiing, it's got whitewater rafting, it's got fantastic hiking, but it's not a place that anyone ever talks about as far as going to for adventure. So I'll be interested to hear your take when you get back. That'll be good.
Yeah, it's pretty country. I'm excited for that. So I'm going to take my 11-year-old son, and we're going to, spend some quality time there. Hopefully it's when they're base jumping. That'd be cool to see.
That would be cool.
So anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
What were we talking about?
Yeah. So, I want to get into right away, you've got a law background. You're in real estate now, which is so atypical of most agents, right? Most agents do not have that type of background. And so I think that's highly appreciated, both on my end as a fellow real estate professional, but for buyers and sellers, right? Having somebody that is the ultimate professional that has that level of detail orientation and sophistication to bring to the table on the real estate side. Tell me, and I've got my notes over here. So you were a partner at this respected law firm with a clear 30-year path ahead of you, a career. Walk us through the conversation that changed that for you in what it took to walk away from that career that you had worked so hard to build. You went to school for it. I'm sure you had thought about law for years at that point. What was it that changed, and what was that like?
Well, to answer that question, I kind of have to go back to when I was in college and the why behind why I chose to go into law school in the first place. And it took me a number of years to process what drew me into that profession. And like I said, my father was a real estate broker. Mm-hmm. And as we were going out and doing stuff, I mean, he had a cabin up in the boonies and we were out doing work on it. And I would just listen to him on these phone calls, solving these complex problems for clients or for other agents. But they were very legally intense conversations, whether they were talking about disclosure issues or easements or contract issues. They were all legally related. And I always wanted to be able to speak with that level of sophistication and tackle complex problems and be able to wrap my mind around and solve those problems. So I thought, law seemed like the natural vehicle to be able to do that and to be a problem solver and to understand complex things. So law school happened. And I knew I wanted to come back to Nevada. I met my wife at the University of Utah, and one of the stipulations of our marriage was, well, I'm probably going to drag you back to the state of Nevada. How do you feel?
Was she okay with that?
She was. Yeah, and she was excited about it. And at the time, Las Vegas had a much bigger legal market. Mm. And sometimes I grew up in Reno, and you don't fully appreciate what you have when you're a teenager. So I never thought I would come back to Reno. I've been there, done that,
right?
Had the T-shirt.
Yeah.
Wanted to go to a bigger, more exciting place. So we went to Las Vegas. It's kind of interesting how I found the firm that I worked for in Las Vegas, because I graduated in 2006 and I clerked for a couple of years. And then the Great Recession really started to sink its teeth in. Mm. So there weren't a lot of law firms that were hiring. And, it was hard on law firms during that time too, as they, had to switch from and pivot from a lot of transactional work that dried up to, a lot of debt workout or litigation work. And the firm that I ended up working for was almost 100% litigation. And there was a bridge accident, that bridge that is next to the Hoover Dam.
Yes.
It used to be that you'd actually...
I've only been once, but yes.
Everybody driving between Las Vegas and Arizona would have to drive over the dam. And then they built the big high-rise bridge, a lot like the New River Gorge bridge. But they had about a 9-figure accident when they were building that bridge. Mm. And so the law firm I ended up working for was involved in that case. And they said, we need to hire a bunch of associates to staff that, to staff that case. And that's how I ended up finding my job. The ironic thing is I hardly did any work on that bridge case, but
But you got the job.
that was how I found my firm.
Yeah.
And great guys, and it was a great fit. And so, I practiced there for, about 7 years.
At that point, did you have a notion that you wanted to get into real estate or no?
No, not at all. I was going to be a lawyer.
So even when you were in law school and then after that, there was never this idea of, hey, I'm going to do law because of real estate. It was purely law focused for the most part, it sounds like.
Yeah, I wanted to understand complicated things.
Right.
Because the nature of the industry during the recession was litigation. And there's a lot that's really fun about litigation. Law practice is hard.
Yeah,
but real estate is hard.
I have no idea what, the inside workings of a litigation law firm looks like, or a litigation case looks like. So that's, when you say that, I don't necessarily know what that means.
Yeah, so at its core, litigation is dispute resolution, involving the court system. Mm-hmm. And at our core, what we're doing is we're resolving disputes. Mm-hmm. By the time the disputes would get to the law firm, there probably usually had been, informal attempts to resolve it without litigation.
Right.
But when we got involved, it was litigation.
Okay.
And people think about the trial part of litigation, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much that happens before you get to the actual trial. And the reality is, on the civil side, most cases never get to trial. It's just so cost prohibitive.
Right.
So most of the times the parties, as they start to see what the case could look like when it unfolds in trial, then they kind of find a comfort level of where the numbers should be to reach a settlement.
To settle, yeah.
So, but before that, there's the discovery process. And all of this built skills that I still use in real estate all the time. Because there's a massive amount of due diligence. You get this case, and you have to marshal all of the evidence that could either help your client's case or could really bury your client's case.
Right.
And sometimes you don't know which direction it's going to go. So we have this, what's called discovery process. And the court system has a very well-established set of rules and procedures for how you do this discovery.
Right.
And there's, most of the time I was researching case law on discovery issues. Like, we need to get this evidence from their computer system. Obviously, parties aren't excited about turning over metadata or stuff on their hard drives.
Right.
So there's, the structured process of resolving disputes. Okay, we want all of that. And they would say, well, there's stuff that has attorney-client privilege. There's stuff that's not relevant to this. There's stuff that involves sensitive financial information that we don't think we should have to turn over.
Right.
There's just 100 little mini disputes,
right,
that are ancillary to the core issue of whether it's liability or contract or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And, it's all really interesting, but I find that in real estate, you have to kind of do your due diligence and look at the evidence you can get on this house. Okay, what things do we need to look at if I'm representing a buyer?
Yeah.
That are going to be relevant for whether this is a home that is, that they're paying a correct value for, or a home that they want to live in. And then there's the inside the courtroom. We're inside the courtroom a ton before we get to the trial.
Right.
There's pre-trial motions, there's discovery motions. Sometimes you'll look at the law and you'll apply it to the facts of the case, and you'll go before the court and say, hey, under the law as it's written, we know everything we need to know. Mm-hmm. This is not a case that should go to trial. They call that, a motion to dismiss or summary judgment.
Okay.
So, I could really get into the weeds. So I found it really interesting.
I love it because it reminds me, as you talk about that, it reminds me a lot of what we do on the mortgage side, trying to anticipate issues throughout underwriting. Obviously, it's not as high stakes. It is, but it's not. Law is very high stakes. It's about as high as it can get for a civilian, right? But it does remind me a lot of what we do on the mortgage side of, hey, we need to discover everything and then anticipate what could be a problem or what's not going to be a problem, and then position it, as needed. So, and it's the same on the real estate side too, like you mentioned. So
What I found though, I mean, high stakes is a matter of perspective. And yeah, I mean, I was involved in 7-figure cases, 8-figure cases, and there was cases down there that even got into the 9 figures. But if you're doing a loan for somebody, usually that's the biggest investment
it's true.
that they're ever making in their life. And their home purchase is the biggest investment. I mean, they're putting a huge chunk of everything they've earned their life into that transaction.
Most people are putting a majority of their net worth into the home.
Yeah.
And sometimes earnest money deposits too can even be sizable to the point that, in my opinion, that's where I think a lot of real estate professionals, both lenders and agents, we don't always realize the impacts that could be had. Like it's not seen as, how should I say this? And I might cut this out, I don't know, but it's not taken as seriously as it should a lot of times, in my opinion. Sometimes you're dealing with tens of thousands of dollars of people's money that if you mess something up, that could be scooped up by the other party, or it could, what have you, right? So I don't think real estate's always taken as serious as it should be.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Because I had clients where writing a $2 million check was a drop in the bucket.
Right.
Not a big deal. It's paper costs. I've had transactions where the earnest money deposit that my buyer would have to pay if they did not cancel correctly, or if they let one of their important contingencies expire, $20,000 or $10,000 can be really devastating to a client.
Sometimes
so that keeps me up at night.
Yeah. Sometimes that can be 100% of somebody's net worth, or even half of it, or a quarter of it. So it's not anything to not take seriously, in my opinion. What did law teach you about real estate? What are the most important takeaways that you got from law?
Well, people ask me all the time, well, do you miss practicing law? And my response has usually been, I feel like I practice as much law in real estate as I did practicing law. And that's really what attracted me to real estate in the first place. So I know I have this terrible habit of giving really long, winding road answers to short questions. But
no, I like it. I appreciate it.
But when we got to the point, I had been at my firm 6-7 years, and law practice is hard. You work a lot of hours, and I certainly had those moments where my whole weekend was blown up because somebody filed a preliminary injunction, and there's some of those events where you have to drop everything and just get busy,
right?
Writing a response to the court that's due in 3 days, or those kind of things. But overall, I really enjoyed, and it's really satisfying when you come out of a case and you had a good cross-examination, or you write a motion and the court accepts it. Law's interesting because I'm sure there's other careers, but it's like a sport where there's somebody on the other side actively trying to ruin your day.
Yeah.
Like it kind of becomes zero sum.
Yeah.
Either you're going to win or they're going to win. And they're looking for every opportunity to make you look bad, to point out the errors in your arguments. And I don't remember homework assignments being as rigorously vetted as any of the motions that I wrote. You do a lot of writing.
Yeah.
And as you progress in your career, hopefully you have associates that are doing a lot of the writing for you. But I always like to write because I like to think through the arguments. But then, the other party will file their opposition and they'll say all the reasons why your argument was stupid and wrong.
Yeah.
And why the court should slap you on the wrists. But it's always satisfying when the court takes all of those arguments and says, Ken, no, you're absolutely right. Like, we agree with you. It feels good.
Oh,
but it comes with its pros and cons. And,
it's a chess match, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. And they're absolutely a strategy on timing. Like, there's rules on when you have to disclose things, but there's some things. Should we disclose this now or should we wait until after we depose?
Right.
Like a classic example, we had some, it's not uncommon. There was a lot of slip and fall cases in Las Vegas during the recession. And I represented some, a lot of strip properties that people would know of in handling. And then a lot of times they could be really large value claims, where if they're claiming spinal injury or traumatic brain injury, I mean, those can be 8-figure cases. And so we'd sometimes send private investigators out to check out these plaintiffs and see if their claims are really authentic. And I had a PI, I remember, because I was on another case in San Antonio, and a PI called me really excitedly, private investigator, and said, "Hey, I think that this plaintiff is about to go to the mountains and go skiing. Do I have permission to, to follow her up the mountain and see what she does?" Now, in fairness, she didn't ski, but he did get this video of her, bent over her pickup truck, working on her windshield wipers. It was a big jacked up pickup truck.
Yeah.
And doing a lot of things that you would not expect a person that had those kind of spine injuries to do.
Right.
And then, say, well, we should wait until after the deposition when we actually interviewed her with a court reporter on the record.
Yeah.
And let's see, how the timing matches for when we had this footage. And, when she said she had her last pain management treatment, because the claim was she's never going to be able to bend over or do any of these things again because of this injury.
Right. And that clearly wasn't the case.
Yeah. And I mean, my recollection now, it's, been a number of years ago, so I can't remember all the details, but what she said was very inconsistent with what was on that video. And I've got dozens of examples like that of stuff that you find. So it is really a chess match where you have to think about, what's the structure of all of this and what are we building towards? And you have to kind of begin with, okay, what do we want to argue at trial? And what evidence do we need to get there?
Right.
So you got to begin with the end in mind and work backwards. So I liked it. That's the thing. And I eventually made partner at my firm. You travel more for marketing and for client obligations. But overall, I felt like my family was in a good place. I was in a good place. It's hard on my wife and 3 children, who were young at the time when I was out of town more. But there wasn't this sense like, oh, this law practice thing just isn't going to work for us. We've got to find something else.
Right.
But one night we were, and I think it was early 2015, we were just laying in bed, and my wife, Alicia, said, what if we were to just totally pivot into real estate? And what if we were to move to Reno? Now, every time we visited Reno to visit my parents, Alicia would ask me, why don't we live here? The mountains are phenomenal. She was from Utah, so she loved the mountains. Yeah. Loved Tahoe. Why don't we live here? And I would say, well, it's just a much smaller legal market up here. She kind of had this epiphany. I mean, we'd call it inspired.
Right.
It felt like there was a prompting from a higher power than us.
Certainly.
That kind of led us that direction.
Yeah.
So we explored it for about 3 months. And I reached out to my father, who was still in real estate, and kind of threw the idea out. And I didn't know if he was going to tell me I was crazy or if he was going to be supportive. It turned out he was really supportive. He just said, well, don't show up here until you have your license.
So basically, don't quit your law until you got your license, is basically what he said.
Yeah, well, he said, well, if you're going to come up here and do this, be ready to work when you get here.
Yeah.
Day one. Yeah. So we explored it, and it felt right it felt like the right thing to do to make the switch.
Yeah.
And the hardest conversations I had were with my mentors, my partners, the attorneys I worked with, because I love that firm. I still do. And I keep in touch with them. They're all great people.
Yeah. Those are always tough conversations. Departing from a great place.
I mean, they were glad that I wasn't moving to a competitor and trying to take business.
Right.
But they were supportive and said, well, if this doesn't work work out. You know, you have a home here. If you ever want to come back, but I'm going on 11 years. Doesn't look like I'm going back.
I love that. I love that. So there's so many similarities between law and what you do in real estate now. You told me a story off camera of how you learned the hard way early on. You entered real estate with a lot of confidence, and it looked like, from the story, you had gotten humbled quickly. Tell us about the moment in those first few months that made you realize how much there was to learn about real estate and the unconventional thing you did to do that.
When I entered real estate, so we figured out the mechanics and decided we were going to do this and move to Reno, and really real estate made it possible because we sold a rental property we had down there and on our primary residence, and that became our nest egg to go into real estate. Took the pre-licensing, took the tests, got my license. Alicia got her license. When I came up to Reno, though, I'm thinking, listen, I'm a lawyer. How complicated could this be? I was feeling pretty confident in my abilities to understand the profession. And I always do this intentionally. There's this debate in the profession about whether real estate is an industry or a profession. A lot of it's semantics, but I really think that real estate is a profession, just like medicine is a profession, law is a profession. I feel like what we do as real estate professionals is a lot closer to what an attorney does for a client, or a therapist does for a client, or a doctor does for a client, than it is to like your typical sales job where you have customers and it's an industry and you're trying to build and grow. Now, those who favor the industry, they favor like you've got to build systems and you've get your product out there and market your product. And there's some truth and wisdom to that, to be sure. But I think for real estate professionals to survive going forward, they need to look at it as a profession, and that our value is in the experience and wisdom and knowledge that we bring to our clients. I came up here thinking, I'm going to be really good at this. First couple of weeks, we do our first open house, and Alicia was going to do it with me, but she had to do a couple things, so I got it started. So I was there by myself at this open house. I remember it was in Sparks, and I was like a deer in headlights when the first people came in, and all these 1,000 questions I have running through my head. What exactly am I supposed to say now? What am I supposed to do? And I realized there's a lot about homes that I don't know, and they were peppering me with questions about, construction and, the plumbing and, a lot of it I didn't have really good answers for. And then Alicia came about half an hour in, and she had some experience as a realtor in Utah.
Okay.
And, she had a background in marketing, and she was so fluid and comfortable and warm and personable with the clients that came in. I actually think we got a client on our first open house, and it was 100% Alicia and 0% me. So I thought, well, this is harder than it looks. Ferrari-Lund has an office tour every Wednesday where we'll go and look at any agents who want us to look at their listings on a particular segment of town.
Yeah, we do tours up here every Tuesday.
And so I went on our first office tour and went to the first house, and the listing agent asked me, well, what do you think the house is worth, Ken? I was like, I have no idea. I don't know anything. I couldn't even tell you within $100,000 what it's worth. So I realized really quickly that there was so much that I didn't know. Yeah, reading the purchase agreement contract, felt super comfortable with that.
Right.
And I still do. But I realized that real estate is a lot harder than it looks from those on the outside.
It's extremely admirable, though, because many folks will not admit that they don't know. But I think that is one of the greatest superpowers, especially today, is if you can admit that you don't know. That's the first step to then knowing. So that's
Yeah, I've always been terrible at hiding ignorance and faking it until I make it.
I'm the same way. I'm like, yeah, I'm not even going to act like I know what I'm talking about here. I'll go find out though. So
Another instance early on, and this was a few months later, and I was taking clients who were from out of town around to see a bunch of different neighborhoods. And I just realized as I was showing them homes, and it's something I thought about before, but it was really crystallized when they asked a lot of good questions, like, well, who built this neighborhood? And easy questions like that.
right.
That I felt like if I'm holding myself out as a real estate expert, I felt like I really should know those questions.
Certainly.
So I started to think about some solutions. Okay, how do I kind of bridge this knowledge gap that I need to bridge really quickly?
Yeah.
And I have a different way of doing things.
Yeah.
I always have. I'm terrible in the sales programs on, how you should be allocating your time to build up your business. I've always been a terrible listener.
Yeah.
So I spent a ton of time. I pulled out the map of the Reno Sparks area, and I said, I'm going to understand every neighborhood. I want to understand who built it. I want to drive every street. I want to really understand Reno Sparks. This kind of became my side project during a lot of evenings and mornings. And if I'd have a showing or appointment, I'd build in some extra time to go and explore around.
Yeah.
Now, I know a lot of trainers would say, Ken, you should have spent all that time prospecting and looking for new clients. And if you don't have clients, then the business isn't going to go very well. So
Right.
I'm not dismissing that entirely. But I spent a lot of time becoming the professional that I wanted to tell my clients that I was.
Correct.
And to really achieve that level of virtuosity. My wife would call it a psychotic pursuit of virtuosity.
Yeah.
And I've always been, I was a urban planning major in undergrad. So I've always kind of had a spatial geographic
Yeah.
mind, and that's how I organize information.
Yeah.
So I had you don't ever see hard copy atlases anymore, but I had a little pocket atlas of Reno that I'd sit on my lap as I was driving around, and I'd drive through neighborhoods and mark in a highlighter pen, what streets I had been on.
Okay.
And it was really illuminating. And I learned a ton about Reno, and I drove down streets I didn't know exist. I think a lot of realtors don't know exist.
Yeah.
And then, I kind of built out this map on Google Maps, and it's amazing what you can learn from a newspapers.com subscription and digging through the assessor records and kind of figuring out, okay, well, you have this neighborhood, and you look at one half of the neighborhood and the houses look kind of different, have kind of a different style
Right.
than the other half of the neighborhood. And I tried to figure out, okay, why are they different and where do I draw the line? And then you find out, yeah, this builder built this phase and, they were a better builder, and this builder built this phase and they weren't as good of a builder. And I had a professor in law school that says, if you look at this long enough, you'll start to see the matrix, like, Neo did in the Matrix, where he started to see the code floating down.
Yeah.
And I really feel like I hit that point in real estate where I started to see, okay, I can now look at a map of Reno and I can see why these houses are, usually sell for a lot less than these houses over here.
That is so fascinating. So you essentially you did enormous amounts of work to understand the foundation of why things were the way they were, is what you're saying. And through that research and understanding, now you can, because you have that foundation, now you can easily identify, oh, this makes sense because of X, Y, or Z. And I love the fact too, that you know how your brain works and you know how you like to work, and that's how you did it. Instead of, I feel like and I fall victim to this myself. I'll be told, hey, this is best practice, you should do this instead. And it's like, well, that's not really how I operate, but okay, sure, I'll try it. And then it's miserable. But yeah, so it's cool that you did it your way.
I feel like all the professional successes that I have had in my life were largely the product of big projects. Like, I'm going to take this and I'm going to master it.
Yeah.
And it pays dividends over, I mean, at this point, a decade.
Right.
It saves a lot of time. So if I have a specific neighborhood I have to look at, and I see this, if I go to out of market to, some of the rural towns where I don't have the same level of the same knowledge base, well, it just means I have to invest a lot more time to figure things out, where, a lot of areas in the sphere that I know really well, I mean, a lot of that work has already been done, and then I have more time to fine tune it and really tailor it to my clients.
Correct.
So it saves you hundreds of hours. Another example of that in law practice, when I was clerking for a judge, I said, writing is so important in law practice. And I said, I'm going to be the best legal writer that I can. So I took like 5 or 6 how to be a really good legal writer type of books, including those really thick citation books, because law prizes precision. And you've got to have your citations exactly correct. And there's a very specific way to cite the cases, or, cite, a statute or code. But I really, got in the weeds and figured out how to do that, where I was spending evening hours and, free time to try to figure it out. And I felt like that was the best skill I learned in law practice.
Did you love it?
Yeah, I did. Well, when you get good at something, it's really fun to do.
Did you love the actual thing you were doing, or did you love, what did you love about it? Because the only way, in my opinion, to truly master something, now you can force yourself to mastery, but I think the people that master things the best truly love it. What did you love about it that pushed you to that excellence level?
Well, at the time, I mean, because what does a law clerk do? They write the opinions for the judges. And so that was how I was spending my time. And that's what I wanted to get really good at. But when you get feedback that your work is really good, you enjoy that. So sometimes you do things because they're enjoyable, and you do them for the sake of, this is something I really enjoy spending time doing. And honestly, staring at the map and doing all that, I enjoyed it. So, learning grammar, I don't think was per se that fun of a thing to do, but I saw the value of the expertise. And when you start to get feedback, it kind of becomes a positive feedback cycle. It's kind of the front runner effect. When you feel like you're at the top, and people ask you questions. I used to teach writing classes to younger attorneys. When you feel like people look to you for guidance and look at you as kind of an expert in the field, it makes you feel kind of good.
Yeah, and then that positive feedback loop feeds into itself. Correct. So I want to circle back to, we were talking about it earlier, real estate's a serious business. That's your motto that I saw when we were talking previously and corresponding via email. What does that actually mean in practice, and what do you wish buyers and sellers understood about real estate professionals?
Real estate is serious business, choose serious professionals has been a tagline that Alicia and I have gone by. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I really think that real estate is a profession. And when I came into the profession, I had the same attitude that a lot of people outside the profession have, which is realtors are dumb. Real estate is easy. It's not a serious business. It's just a bunch of salespeople. You just open doors. And, I had that, even though my father was a real estate broker, I heard all the stuff that people said about realtors, and, I heard a lot of negative comments about realtors and people's perception of realtors in general.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that negative commentary is there?
Well, I think part of it's unfair and a lot of it's self-inflicted, because a lot of realtors do things to feed into the stereotype. But in reality, there's a lot of good realtors out there that really do dignity to the profession. And it wasn't until I was on the inside of the profession, really seeing the mechanics of what happened, what happens, you realize that this is a complicated industry, profession with serious stakes. And I realized that all those years that I wanted to go into law practice, it was kind of this latent respect I had for my father and seeing all of the complicated things that he appeared able to do. And it was all from being in real estate. And I didn't fully appreciate that at first. What I love about real estate the most is you're kind of at the confluence of so many areas. You have the legal side with the contracts, government regulations, disclosures, the art of negotiation. But then you have the construction side of it where you have to, have some working understanding of, how a building is built or how a house is built and know some of the issues that are recurring issues. You have the economic side of it, understanding how markets work, understanding, and I am grateful for lenders to help me with this, but to understand the nuances of financing and to help advise clients on their investment decision, because this is a major allocation of money. And I think while we don't purport to be tax advisors or financial advisors, and we'd be careful to stay in our lane, we have to understand that there's a bigger picture, the decision to buy or sell a home, because it's a massive allocation of a client's resources. And then there's this, as I look at the podcast getup that we have, this whole marketing element. And really, I feel like you have to understand the arts of marketing. We're pretty listing heavy, and there's a lot that goes into getting a house ready to sell and to effectively marketing that house. And it goes from there. If I sat here and thought, and I'm terrible on the spot sometimes, but I could think of 10 to 15 other disciplines that real estate touches upon. So you have to kind of you have to have working expertise in so many different fields.
Yeah.
And people don't appreciate that from the outside looking in. It's like realtor just opens the door, writes a fill in the blank contract, and gets a big check.
Right.
What they don't see, the level of investment that we make in our clients. The kind of a detour here, but we just got a home under contract over the weekend, and we were able to get a good response the first weekend, and we got it under contract the first weekend. Somebody from the outside may say, look at Ken, this is so easy. Ken puts it on the market on Thursday. It's under contract on Monday. He hardly had to do any work.
Right.
But the reality is we've been working on getting that house ready to sell for 2 months, maybe even a little bit longer than that. And, was working with, when I first met with the clients, we were just starting the process. I'm trying to be vague on the details to not give away, confidential stuff. But, we made our checklist. Okay, this is what we need to do to get the house from where it is right now to get it ready to sell. And, we paid our own landscapers to come and clean up the driveway.
You guys fit the bill for the marketing and the cleanup. I mean, what do you, right?
What do I pay for?
Yeah, what do you guys pay for up front?
Yeah, I mean, we always pay a professional house cleaner to deep clean the house. I don't care if it's a $300,000 house or a $3 million house. And a lot of time, and then, if it's a more expensive house, especially, but we look at what does the house need and what should the seller pay for and what are we willing to pay for as part of our marketing budget.
Right.
So that could include window cleaning. It could include carpet cleaning. It could include landscaping cleanup.
Right.
I've become a bigger proponent of paying for pre-listing inspections.
Yes.
And a lot of times, it depends on a lot of factors, but there's some of those things we'll absorb as part of our marketing.
Right.
Because I'm interested in doing the things that add value, and that's why I feel like I'm being paid to do. But whether it's an actual, financial investment on our part or just the time to walk through that process of getting it ready. And then there's a lot of just relationships that we bring value in. Okay, you need to sell all the stuff in this house. Well, I've got a great estate sale professional that I can introduce you to that can help you with all of that. There's repairs that need to be done. I've got a great contractor or great electrician or a great chimney guy, and I can make those introductions. And you do enough business, you have a relationship, and you can count on those guys to show up when they say that they're going to show up.
What do you think agents nowadays, we're in 2026 right now, what do you think agents shoot themselves in the foot when it comes to professionalism and giving the profession a bad reputation?
I mean, go on social media, 15 seconds. There's a lot of different schools of thought on this, and maybe I'm an old fuddy-duddy. My kids certainly have told me that a couple of times. But I think there's a lot of ways that we portray ourselves that diminish the profession and the seriousness of what we do. Now, every profession deals with that. I've certainly seen some embarrassing law firm commercials in my day. And then and some of their marketing departments will say, well, we think that this will actually attract the clients that we want to attract, and we want to be approachable, and we want to be fun.
Right.
But I think we have to be careful on presenting ourselves as serious people, because a lot of people think real estate is an unserious profession.
That's a good point.
But another one is just not having a firm grasp of the fundamentals of what we're doing. And I deal with agents that don't know how the real estate purchase agreement works, and they don't understand how a loan works.
Do you think the barrier to entry into real estate as an agent should be raised?
Well, that's a controversial question, but yes, I think that given the gravity of what we do, I think it's too easy to get into the profession.
I agree. And I would also second that on the loan side as well.
I know others will argue against that, and it's certainly the case that there are great real estate agents who don't have a lot of college experience or even professional experience that can truly prove to be great agents. So I'm careful not to propose a one-size-fits-all solution.
Correct.
But I just know that I see on social media a lot of agents who purport to be experts who don't have the requisite level of expertise, I think, to honestly make that claim.
Yeah.
And I have trouble with the fake it until you make it kind of mentality that they have in marketing.
Certainly.
I can't tell you how many number one agents do we have in Reno Sparks? Because I see advertisements, and not just this market, but other real estate markets, where people say we're the number one in sales or volume. And, I wonder myself, how do you measure that claim?
Or the awards too. XYZ award that you've never heard of, but yeah, don't get me started. There's wonderful, wonderful professionals in the industry and the profession, but I do think it is taken unseriously, especially by consumers. And I think we don't do a great job as a professional industry of portraying a seriousness and the due diligence that has to happen on every transaction. So I do think I appreciate people like you that do portray it as a serious business and represent the profession in a way that is outstanding.
And I don't want to be misunderstood, because I see that every day. There are so many good realtors in our area who deeply care about their clients' well-being.
Certainly.
And I think that's another area where we shoot ourselves in the foot. I see a lot of instances where it could be perceived from the outside that the brokerage or the agent is putting their interests first above their clients. And I definitely think that there's that perception from outside looking in, that where people feel like the realtors are more interested in protecting their compensation than furthering the interests of their clients. And oftentimes it's unfair. But I get into dangerous territory when I see on a daily basis a lot of realtors who clearly have their interests at the forefront, and what's guiding their decision isn't the possibility of compensation. It's what is the right decision for my client and how can I help them to get there.
Correct.
And I'd like to see that much more visible so that the public could see what I see, which is a lot of really good people really trying to do a good job and trying to gain the competence and expertise to be worthy of their clients' trust.
Certainly. I appreciate that. And feel free to dive in on your end. So there's Zillow and there's Compass, and they're feuding between the marketplace.
Well, yeah, and that debate goes, broader than any particular entity. But I mean, the Zillow Compass dispute has gotten a lot of publicity as of late, but it's a symptom of a broader debate in the profession, which is how are we going to push out this data to the clients? I think that one thing the public doesn't understand or appreciate is how efficient the real estate marketplace has become.
What do you mean by that?
If a buyer, information is so readily available to any given buyer, and I think it's been very, very good for the industry to have access to that information. In the olden days, even back in the 70s when my father started, one of the values of a real estate agent was making listing information available to the buyer, where if they didn't connect with a realtor, they weren't going to have access to that information. There was a
gatekeeping of the information.
Absolutely. So the problem used to be we can't get the information. And now with the evolution of MLSs and online portals, and then major portals like the Zillows and the Redfins and the Realtor.coms and the Homes.coms of the world, if I, as a consumer, a non-real estate consumer, want information on the real estate market and pricing and what's available, I mean, it's blossomed and evolved in a way where I can know what's on the market and have a pretty comprehensive sense of what's available. I had a transaction recently that involved water rights, and occasionally people will ask me, what the value of the home is with these water rights. Have you ever had to deal with water rights at all?
No, not on our end. We did deal one time. There was a deal out in near Virginia City, that dealt with mineral rights, but not water rights.
Well, the water rights market is the most opaque, closed, and inefficient market that I can possibly imagine. I couldn't possibly imagine it being any worse. Where there's no way to easily understand what a ready, willing, and able buyer would be willing to pay for a given water right. Even commercial real estate to an extent, it's a lot more open than it used to be with the CoStars, LoopNets, Crexes. But it's still a little more complicated to really get a comprehensive sense what's available right now for sale, who's willing to sell. Where in the real estate industry right now, the customer has access to a wealth of information, all the market information they could possibly want. And where the realtor's value is now interpreting that information.
Right.
But I feel like there's this balkanization going on right now, and there are forces that want to bring more of that information in-house and make less of that information available to the public.
Behind closed doors, per se.
Well, I mean, or out in the open. I mean, the 3-phase plan that Compass has. To an extent, I can understand they're trying to accomplish. And this is where, I don't want to ruffle feathers or stir the pot too much, but I don't think it's good for the markets to have brokerages try to exclusivize the information about homes that are for sale to their own portals. And I think pretty clearly that is what they are trying to do. They want to take influence away from Zillow, and instead of people looking at Zillow to find what is available on the market, understandably, Compass wants people to go to the Compass website,
right,
and see what Compass has for sale.
They control lead flow. Whichever website people visit controls lead flow.
And it's about control. And I don't begrudge them for wanting more people to visit their website or go to their agents. In the same way that, real estate agents will advertise, we can give you access to tons of pocket buyers, or we have a lot of people that we work with that we could introduce you to the home. I mean, that's nothing new. And I think that this is just, that same thing of a different flavor, where, they're trying to get people to stop looking at this portal in favor of their portal. But to do that, they have to create exclusive content that you can only find on this portal, so that there's a reason, to break the habit of always just by default going to that portal.
Right.
So there's this control thing. And I can understand, the strategy of wanting to do that. But I don't think that's good for the industry, because where I don't want to be in 5 years, to have a market where a buyer has to decide, am I going to work with brokerage A so that I can get pre-access to all of brokerage A's listings? Or do I want to work with brokerage B so I can get access to all of brokerage B's listings? That's not an efficient marketplace, I think. And that's where our multiple listing service does a really good job, is, and it syndicates to all the portals. So when I say, they're looking at Zillow for that, really, they're looking at what the MLS syndicates.
Right.
So it's the MLS at the core of all of that. And I think these multiple listing services really have created a much better marketplace, that when you compare it to marketplaces for other amenities or products out there, I think if people were to compare, they'd like the real estate one a lot more, because it gives them knowledge and it gives them information rather than hiding it behind closed curtains. And I feel like if we go down this road, there's going to be this divide where I can't get all the information on the MLS portal, because they say it's all about generating buzz and stuff. But the natural consequence, if I'm going to do a private exclusive that's only shown to agents within my brokerage, well, naturally, there could be people that see this house that they want to make an offer, and they want to make an offer before it hits market. I mean, that is an intended consequence, and they keep more deals within that brokerage. I think most sellers want maximum exposure for their house, and they want to show it to every single possible willing, ready, and able buyer that's out there. And so this staggered, we're going to do it exclusively first, and then we're just going to put it on our portal, but it's not going to be on the MLS or any other portal.
Who does that serve ultimately?
Well, and that's why I don't want to impugn negative motives, but I think the natural consequence is that, there's going to be people who see that listing that will be able to kind of cut in line and buy it first. And maybe the seller thinks, well, I'm great. I'm really happy with the price I got. But what if you put it on the MLS and you realize that there is a whole bigger pool of buyers that would be willing to pay even more for that house.
Right.
I think the open market is the best sifter of what a home's true value is.
Yeah.
And if we, tried to do these things where we're only showing it to a segment of people, I can't see how that is good in the totality.
It creates an opaque. It muddies the waters a bit. Creates more of an opaque market. That's why.
And that's my concern. So having competing marketplaces, I think doesn't do sellers good.
Well, it's clear that you are certainly on the side of the client, that you are going to do what's best for the client. You've got a fantastic reputation around Northern Nevada as an agent and show the utmost professionalism, which I appreciate. Ken, to wrap this up, people want to work with you. How can they best connect with you?
Yeah, Reno-Lund.com is my website. You can look that up. It has all of our contact information. My cell number is 775-870-6332. I love texts. I love phone calls. I'm always glad to hear from people who haven't met me before. And I'd love to strike up a conversation and talk about how Alicia and I can be of assistance. Oh, and other exciting news. And we just have a new assistant on our team, a new realtor. She just got her license last week, but she has been a real estate savant for a number of years. I've known her for well over a decade, and I've been involved with real estate transactions, and her mind for real estate is exceptionally keen.
That's great.
She bought new construction with me, and she, when we went to the design center, she had her spreadsheets and really came as an informed, savvy buyer. So her name's Allison Savant, and she'll be joining our team. And so there's a wealth of talent between Alicia, me, and Allison, and we'd love to talk to clients about what we could bring to the table for them.
That's excellent. Congratulations on growing the team. Well done. Allison Savant, what a fantastic last name as well. Reno-Lund.com. That's RENOLUND for those listening. Reno-Lund.com. It'll also be in the description of the video, as well as Ken's phone number and any other sites linked to Ken. Ken, thank you so much.